In this video, I'm going to show you how I attach bias binding to a clear zipper pouch. This is the bias binding I will be using. I created it from 1 fat quarter of cotton woven fabric. I have another video where I show you how I made that. The first thing I do is clip off the end so we have a nice straight edge to work with. Next, I unzip the zipper and tuck the zipper pull inside to protect it. This zipper pouch doesn't really have a front side. Both sides are considered the pretty side. So when deciding how you want to sew your bias binding on, I usually do it with the way the zipper opens. I consider that the front of the pouch. The binding should be slightly longer than the pouch so that you can fold the end down and have a nice finished edge at the top of the pouch. Take the end and fold the two edges that you just folded down back together so that the raw edges meet, and then align it with the raw edge at the end of the pouch. Now it's time to clip the binding to the edge of the clear pouch. I plan to sew from the front, but I'm going to clip the binding on the back. That way I can see what's going on. I use a lot of clips. You can use however many you feel comfortable with, and I'm putting the flat side towards the back. When you get to the corners, take your time and really smooth that out so you have a nice rounded edge with no pleats or folds. When you get to the other end of the bag, you will need to clip the binding again, leaving a small overhang so that we can fold those edges down just like we did on the other side. You can remove some clips here if you need more space in order to fold that raw edge down. You want the folded edge to align with the top part of the pouch, and then clip the remaining section of binding. Now you can see the binding is clipped to the back, and we're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all around the front of the pouch. I'll be sewing from the front side of the pouch, which has the clear vinyl up, so I'm going to switch from my standard machine foot to my Teflon non-stick foot. We'll begin sewing from the top, which is quite thick and really needs a hump jumper. I use a fork as a hump jumper. I know it's really weird, but I'll show you why in this video. So I'm going to place it underneath the back of the presser foot, and we are going to backstitch at the beginning of this. I often hand crank my machine through thicker parts of the bag just to help with consistency. There is actually a tool called a hump jumper that you can purchase. I've seen people use folded pieces of fabric, vinyl, needle cases. You can use whatever works for you. As I approach the end of the top fabric piece, there's another bulky seam, and I will need to use my hump jumper again once I transition onto the clear vinyl. So on this side, I'm going to sew in between the prongs of the fork, and that's why I prefer to use this as my hump jumper. So I'll remove a couple of clips so that I can fit it in there, and I'll line it up along my seam, and I'll put my needle right between the prongs of the fork. And it will just glide right onto it, keeping the presser foot level. Once I get past the bulky seam, I can remove my hump jumper fork and continue sewing around the edge of the pouch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I grab a microfiber towel here to help ease the pouch along the surface of my machine and table because it was sticking a little. You can do this with towels, fabric, tissue paper, whatever works best for you, or you can fold the bag up to get out of your way. As I approach the next bulky seam, I grab my fork and I'm going to stick it under the back of the presser foot sideways this time to help get over the bulk seam. Make sure you backstitch at the end to keep the binding secure. You'll want to inspect your corners to make sure that everything was caught in the seam allowance and that it is smooth and there are no creases or folds. Back on the front side, we're going to add some 1/8 inch double-sided tape just on the clear vinyl portion within the seam allowance. Now you want to wrap the folded edge of the binding around to the front and clip it in place. You should try and align the folded edge right at your stitch line where you did your 1/4 inch seam allowance previously. On the clear portion, you want the folded edge on the back to align with the folded edge on the front. You may have to manipulate it a little bit to get them aligned straight, especially on the corners. I sped this up a lot, but I spent a lot of time getting those corners just right. Now we will take this back to the machine and stitch 1/8 inch away from the folded edge of the binding. Since I will not be sewing directly on the vinyl, I'll switch from my Teflon foot back to my standard presser foot. You can sew with your project on either side of your needle, however I prefer mine on the right side if it will fit under the mouth of my machine, just because I know I can get a good 1/8 inch seam allowance lining it up on a certain spot of my presser foot, and then the majority of my presser foot is on the binding instead of on the vinyl. You will need to backstitch at the start and end of this final seam. Take your time on the corners. I often hand crank through these and pivot after each stitch to get that nice round corner. And here you can see the finished product. The bias binding bends around the corners so nice and neat and allows it to curve very smoothly. Thank you so much for watching my tutorial. I hope that you found some of these tips and tricks useful.